UVA, I think in 1966 was a totally different world in a lot of places in the country. And I think it's very important when we start talking about May Days and student activism to understand where UVA was coming from.
The fall of 68, I came to the university, and I really felt like in some ways it was a respite from the rest of the world. There wasn't that much political involvement. There wasn't that much protesting that at least I was that involved with.
UVA was a small for state university, total around 8,000 students, about 5,000 undergraduates, not even.
You know, there were no women. It was still a boys' school, essentially. I mean, really, it was.
When I started, everybody, virtually everybody, 95% of the guys wore a coat and tie to class. So that was the other part of the boys' school and sort of this, prep school orientation. That was just what you did. And very few people thought twice about it.
I remember hearing a man at one of the orientation meetings, and there was this lecture by a man named T. Braxton Woody, who was a historian at UVA, on how if women were admitted to the College of Arts and Sciences, the honor system would go out the door. And it wasn't done tongue-in-cheek. He really meant it.
Relatively quickly, the culture seemed to change. Almost overnight, the way people dressed for class. People used to wear coats and ties to classes. People wore coats and ties to the cafeterias to eat on the meal plans.
You could sort of see in front of your very eyes that people were beginning to back off from the sort of the rigid conservative standards.
I do think that was one of the positive things that was going on in the community was engagement of more traditional conservative students with more moderate, I'll even say progressive students.
So when we came back to school for the beginning of the second year, I wouldn't say coat and tie was dead, but I don't remember it being as prominent.
It was kind of cool to be anti-war, cool to be progressive. The music, the rock and roll, everything sort of fit into that.
It was clearly a beginning of a very visible sea change in the sort of the underlying culture of the place.
Some of the students older than I wanted to create a progressive organization on the grounds, and we called it the Virginia Progressive Party.
We stood for change. We wanted more student engagement. We wanted diversity. I think most of the folks stood for co-education.
The Virginia Progressive Party was what really created a new place for people to gather, and we started winning all these student council places, and it changed. It just the fraternities always had a lot of influence, but they lost their dominant stature.
I was in a fraternity, so this wasn't entirely sort of anti-fraternity. It was sort of anti always electing someone whose father and grandfather had gone to the university, who had Roman numerals after his name and things of that sort. Sort of the older notion of the university. And I think it really was sort of the touch point for the transition from the older university to the modern university.